welcome back. This is another TF2sday, this time a little sub-series that I'm going to be calling TF2torial. I am sure I am not the first person to have thought of this, but it's, you know, so TF2sday, TF2torial. There. I'm sure I'm the first person to put those two together. Actually, I'm pretty sure I'm not, but whatever. So, today, I'm going to be... So, first, I should give a quick overview as to what this sort of sub-series is all about. This is a sub-series that is dedicated entirely to basically explaining the ins and outs of the game for newer players. I started playing about 10 years ago or so, a little earlier. And I would like to think that I have a pretty good understanding of a lot of the core game mechanics. I have over 3,000 hours, but those are almost all idling, because back in the day there was a thing with... Anyway, I think about probably 1,500 or so, so actually about half-ish, maybe, of my hours in the game are actual playtime hours. A lot of them are practice hours. So I'd say, like, actual in-match time is probably about 1,000 hours. Roughly. And a fair bit of that spent on less serious servers. So, you know, I am anything but an authority on the competitive shit. What I am an authority on, though, is the math and the numbers, because I have read the wiki. And though the folks on the wiki do get things wrong from time to time, they are very often on point. So this episode, this first episode of the TF2torial speed, is going to be on the single most important statistic in the game. It is the reason why I am doing this little intro as Scout. It is what Scout is pretty much all about. It is, as you might have guessed if you have sort of picked up on that so far, speed. Now, TF2 is what's often referred to as a movement-based shooter. That means that you have free movement, and your main way of lining up your shots is by the comparative movement of you and the person you're shooting at. You want to position yourself so that you are shooting at them where they will be when the actual damage goes through the server, and you want to have them position themselves, unintentionally of course, in your bullets. Now, there are a few key things to know about speed. First off, bullets, like, you know, most weapons have, are hit scan projectiles. So what that means is that you shoot, it calculates a deviation, it calculates a trajectory, and then the bullet just is at the end of that, and it basically draws a line. The first thing that line intersects with, the bullet hits. So when I shoot over there, even though there is that, you know, visual of the tracer rounds going across and, you know, all that, that is just a visual effect. If you go into a game with replays enabled and you take a replay and you slow it down a whole lot, you will see the bullet hole appear or the player take damage or what have you before the bullet, like, image even gets, well, depending on distance, halfway. So, yeah. The next thing to know is that non-hit scan projectiles have a wide range of speeds, whereas players actually have a pretty narrow range of speed. Of course, that can be changed relatively easily through slows and whatnot, but flows are also pretty easily avoided. So, without further ado, hang on, that's the wrong button. There we go. Let's actually get into it. So let's start things off with the slowest you can get under your own power. Brass Beast Heavy, with the Brass Beast fully spun up, moves at obviously a snail pace. You, without other stuff slowing you down, cannot move any slower than that. In fact, I actually have all of the speeds written up here, so give me one moment. So, before we actually talk about numbers, we need to talk about the hammer unit. Now, that phrase might sound a bit weird to you at first, but essentially, TF2 and other early Source games are made in an engine called, well, not an engine, rather. Source is the engine. But the level editor is called Hammer. Hammer has distinct units. So, of course, the term for the units of distance that the level editor uses is hammer units. That is all of the significance behind the name. Do not let anyone tell you something different because they are lying to you. Now, I did say that a Brass Beast Revved Heavy is the slowest you can go under your own power. That is because it is the slowest you can actually go. See, if you crouch while revving any of the miniguns, you just don't go. Like, I'm frantically mashing the directional keys right now, and I'm not moving anywhere. Oh, I hit E by accident there. So, yeah, you can't move while you're crouched and revved. That is pretty much, you know, it. If you crouch as heavy and you're trying to shoot someone with your primary weapon, you are basically a sentry. That's all there is to it. You're an immobile turret, but, you know, at least you're hard to hit because you're crouching. I mean, compared to how hard this big guy usually is to hit. Real easy target there, even when he's crouched. Now, when you've got the Brass Beast revved, you move at a shocking 44 hammer units per second. Now, that should give you an idea of just how fast a hammer, or just how short a hammer unit actually is. Because if you look, it's taken me a while to really get anywhere. Like, I'm going... I'm moving places, but not very fast, right? So, then we get, of course, to the Heavy's next... Oops, wrong button again. The Heavy's next slowest speed, which is... Once I respawn, there we go. Revving any other minigun except the Brass Beast. Now, at this shocking speed, you are actually moving more than twice as fast as the Brass Beast Heavy. In fact, almost 3 times at a speed of 110 hammer units per second. And you can already see, like, this feels a lot faster, because it is a lot faster. As I said, it's about 2 3/4 as fast. But, of course, that is still less than half the speed of Heavy just walking around like a normal person. Well, normal, large person. So then, that brings us on to the next speed up for Heavy, the eviction notice. If you see someone using these, it is either because they are trying to do a JoJo meme, or because they do not know how this game works. If Heavy ever has his melee out for any purpose other than mobility or defense, he is dead, basically. Heavy is super powerful in close range with his other weapons, but he's also super weak at close range because, well, he's a big target. He's real easy to meet shot with, say, a scattergun. So, yeah. Ooh, wrong loadout. There we go. Heavy's next big speed up... Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned. The eviction notice gets you to 264 and a half hammer units per second. Yes, half hammer units are a thing. The next step up is the gloves of running urgently. These things are pretty much one of the two must-haves for heavy. Or must-have melees for heavy. The other one being the Fists of Steel. The gloves of running urgently let you, run urgently, and the Fists of Steel let you run through a field of fire without taking too much damage to your actual health. Now, these things put heavy up to 299 hammer units per second. Now, it is worth noting that the base move speed for most classes is 300, meaning that heavy is still not quite as fast as these bots here, which are set to move at the default run speed. So you can see I am not quite keeping pace with this demo man here. He's slightly outpacing me just a little bit. And of course I don't get catapulted, so... And next we have the completely useless item for heavy, because it actually makes him die, the buffalo steak sandwich. Now, normally this brings you up to the same move speed as the gloves of running urgently. But if you have the gloves of running urgently and the sandwich, or buffalo steak sandwich specifically going, you get to 310 hammer units per second instead. Or at least you did as of the time I took these numbers. Let me just run a real quick test on this, because these guys should be going at 300. So let's just eat real quick. And if I can... yeah, I'm catching up to that scout, right? So I'm slowly closing the distance. That right there is the proof that I'm going slightly faster than average. Now, I'm not closing the distance by much, obviously. So yeah, the buffalo steak sandwich is a joke weapon. I do not mean that in the sense that it was added as a joke. I mean that in the sense that you are a joke if you use it, because it locks you into using your melee, which, as I mentioned, heavy should never be using except for, mobility purposes. And the gloves of running urgently don't take up your secondary slot and let you move just as fast. I mean, yeah, okay, you move slightly faster using both the Gru and the steak sandwich, but it's not worth it, considering that you can have, say, the Delocos bar or the fish cake in your secondary slot, and then just regain all of the health that the Gru drains. Now, there is one tempting thing with the heavy and the eviction notice, and that is the speed boost on hit. Now, this speed boost does get you to the fastest heavy can move. However, that is only 357 hammer units per second. It is not fast at all. So that's heavy for you. Heavy, of course, the slowest class in the game. Now, Soldier is also very slow. In fact, he even gets slower than a revving heavy when he is using this bad boy, the Cow Mangler something thousand, 5,000. There we go. Now, this thing is special because you charge up a shot with it. But you move very slowly when you're doing that, at only 80 hammer units per second, meaning you're a little less than twice as fast as a Brass Beast Heavy who's revved. This obviously is not an ideal situation, but when you consider that this is sort of meant to be a, peek around the corner while you're charging it and then let the blast rip sort of weapon, it makes more sense. But Soldier's base move speed is slightly faster than Heavy, at 240 hammer units per second. And we saw with the BSS Gru combo how much of a difference those 10 hammer units a second can make. And obviously that difference is even bigger on a very slow class like Soldier. So, next up is the third slowest. Had to brain a little there. Third slowest class in the game, the Demo Man. Now, Demo Man actually is capable of moving a little slower than Soldier, at 238 hammer units per second, by equipping this bad boy, the Scotsman Skull Cutter. Now, when it's inactive, its movement speed penalty does not come into play, but, well, when active, yeah, it's real easy to notice. Of course, it does have a nice damage bonus, meaning that you can two-shot medics, but it's still pretty not great as far as a weapon goes. Demo Man, like I said, gets even slower than Soldier while he's using it, meaning that the only people he'll be able to actually, you know, chase with it are heavies. And you do not want to melee a heavy, because melee range is also the minigun deals 100 damage per second range. And you do not want the minigun dealing 100 damage per second when you do not have, you know, 300 health like a heavy. In the time it takes you to kill a heavy with this thing at point blank, which is to say, melee range, the heavy has killed you twice. Maybe 3 times. Of course, that is not the end-all, be-all of Demo Man. Base speed of 280, which means that it is, in fact, slightly faster than Soldier. Much more so than Soldier is compared to Heavy. In fact, the gap between Demo Man and Soldier is bigger than the gap between Demo Man and most of the standard speed classes. Now, Demo Man has a funny little item called the, well, many funny little items. The Tide Turner, the Charge and Targe, the Splendid Screen, they're all just shields. And with those shields, as I've been demonstrating, you can charge. Now, while you are charging, you move at a freaking blistering speed of 700 hammer units per second. Now, let's see, I seem to have missed a couple numbers in here for charging Hybrid Knight. Oh well. Not super important, but Hybrid Knight just means a Demo Knight whose primary weapon is an actual weapon. Now, let me just swap that back. If we swap over to here and put the Scotsman Skull Cutter back on, 701.25 is the speed of a charge with this thing. Now, that bonus also brings standard demo up to 308 hammer units per second. Well, standard Demo Knight, or Skull Cutter Demo Knight, up to still below average 261.8. In fact, that's even slower than a Demo Knight with, well, hang on. Yeah, it's slower than a Demo Knight with none of this. Bonk. So, then, if we actually bonk, switch back over to a normal Hybrid Knight, these things, the shield and a regular primary weapon, I do not have. What? Why can I? Oh, I switched to the wrong loadout. Whoops! There we go. So, yes. You can see it's a little bit faster. I do not have the numbers in front of me, but I'm just going to do the quick maths in my brain space. Actually, I think... I'm just going to do some quick math. Sorry, I did some quick maths and I got some weird numbers, so I looked it up, and yeah, so your speed is in fact capped at 750 while charging, which is also usually what it sets it to, so wearing the boots doesn't increase your charge speed. The more you know, the more I know, you know? Yeah, you know. That's the whole point of this, is that now you know. So, next up, we got Demo Man's next fastest, which is, or, well, absolute fastest, really, is just that charge. But his normal speed can be increased quite a good deal. So, this here Islander increases speed with each head you take. Now, what that means, and the maximum I should mention, is 4 heads. So now that I've got these 4 heads, I'm actually moving faster than a scout should. Or actually, no, sorry, I think it's... No, it is 4 heads is the maximum. So yeah, I am, right now, moving at 406.56 hammer units per second. Now, with that said, the Islander Demo Knight, or Islander Hybrid Knight rather, only moves at 369 hammer units per second, 369.6, which of course means in turn that, well, still not as fast as Scout, but faster than basically anyone else by a substantial margin. Now, you don't really need to worry about all the increments between Demo Man's normal speeds and those speeds, but you can, you know, math it out by saying, okay, each head is a quarter of the way to that final cap. Oh, come back here. Now, that's it for demo. Next up are the standard speed classes. So I'm going to be using Engineer to represent this, specifically because Engineer actually gets a little bit slower. So if I just whack up a sentry real quick here. While carrying this thing, the Engineer's speed actually drops to 270, a 10% reduction, which means that now Demo Men are faster. Obviously, this is not good as an Engineer, because you want to be able to run away from the Explodey boys. They will wreck your stuff. So, Engineers really need to keep that in mind. I actually didn't know that hauling buildings like this slowed you down until I was doing the research for this video. So, just keep in mind, Engineer plus this thing equals slower than Demo Man. Let's just drop that. So, like I mentioned before, base speed is 300 hammer units per second. That is the default. That's just how, that's sort of how we measure. Like, if you look at the wiki, you'll see a lot of percentage speeds. Those are percentage of 300 hammer units per second. Now, our next step upwards in the speed chain is the Pyro with the Power Jack. This thing is considered a must-have melee for Pyro, since it speeds him up and gives you health on kill. Which, you know, really helps for combo Pyro, which is otherwise kind of dead since they fucked the extinguisher into the ground. Yeah. Anyway, this thing lets the Pyro move at a very respectable 45%. Or it's not 45%, 45 hammer unit per second increase. So 345 per second. That is, of course, just 15% increase. But hey, it's enough to put him faster than medics and spies, which is good because these little buggers would outrun you otherwise. And they're sort of your prey. So, next up, The next sort of step upwards is, of course, those spies and medics. Now, I'm going to be using the medic here just because of this little thing. And I should actually switch to the Uber. Yeah. So that I can build up the Uber. So the overdose here speeds up the medic. Now, base move speed for medic and spy is 320 hammer units per second. Now, obviously, these are all set to be moving at standard move speed of 300. But you can see I'm just so slightly able to catch up with them. Now, this move speed also means that a BSS GRU heavy cannot catch up to a medic or a spy. Excuse me, or a spy. Now, this is especially true if that medic happens to have, excuse me, full ubercharge and an overdose, in which case, well, this thing boosts move speed by 20%. So that brings us up to 384 hammer units per second, which is not quite as fast as Scout, but pretty darn close. Of course, like the other syringe guns, don't even think about actually getting kills with it in a realistic situation. Like, look, I'm shooting at stuff that's moving in a predictable line, and I'm struggling, kind of. These things have super short range. This is not a combat weapon. This is not even a PDW. This is a move speed booster for if you need to run. And actually, I just realized I'm going to have to cut this back in with the heavy. Hoo boy, here it comes. The fast boy himself, the Scoot. Now, the slowest Scout can go without being slowed is, well, 360 hammer units per second. That is with the Babyface's blaster and no boost. Now, a default move speed for Scout is 400 hammer units per second. But the Babyface's blaster lets him get a fair bit above that. So you can see with full boost, I am running around at the speed of sound. In fact, at full boost, the Scout is actually so fast, he outruns his hitbox. The way that they solved this was, interestingly enough, not to fix that, not to slow the Babyface's blaster Scout down, but instead to make it so that you lose a ton of boost every time you take damage. Which doesn't really solve the problem, because you're still outrunning your hitbox. But, yeah. At this blistering speed, Scout moves at 520 hammer units per second. This is, in fact, the maximum speed you can get without a demo man's charge. It is normally the speed cap. This, of course, is not exactly the, well, blistering nightmare speed you might expect from what I mentioned about how it allows the Scout to outrun his hitbox. But, you know, you can already see how just moving almost twice as fast as everyone else actually also kind of makes it hard to aim. So, the Babyface's blaster, while it is fun to, you know, do some sonic RP rolling around at the speed of sound, it's not very practical, because you are outrunning your hitbox, which, yes, makes it harder for people to hit you if they're good, but also makes it easier for them to hit you if they're bad. But also, more importantly, you're also outrunning everyone else's hitbox, basically. So, now that we have discussed player speeds, it's time to talk about projectile speeds. Now, I'm not going to go as in-depth. The whole reason that I went that in-depth was to, well, give you a good sense of how different speeds match up. Obviously, projectile speeds are going to be a lot more generalized, because even when you have changes within a category, they never actually break out of that category, like how a Babyface's blaster Scout is actually only a tiny bit faster than an eviction notice speed boost heavy, or a Cow Mangler charging soldier is actually slower than a heavy revving a minigun. Or say how a Islander Demo Knight with 4 heads is faster than a stock scout. So, in order to talk about projectiles, we need to talk about the projectile classes. First one is Demo Knight. Demo Man. Demo Knight doesn't have any projectiles. But Demo Man is in possession of the slowest projectiles in the game, the Sticky Bomb. Now, these things move very slowly. They move at 925.38 hammer units per second at minimum charge. Now, that is important because they are also the 3rd fastest projectiles in the game. That's right, the slowest and some of the fastest. It's a weird situation that Demo Man finds himself in. So you can see, just click, and it's not very energetic. But if I charge this thing up, boom, it goes at 2,409 hammer units per second. Now, Quickie Bombs have a slightly faster minimum, but that doesn't really matter for this. Now, the next projectile we're going to talk about here, just for the sake of convenience and not because of speed, is grenades. Now, these things, well, you can already see they're a fair bit faster than those minimum charge sticky bombs, but they're also a fair bit slower than the maximum charge ones. So, yeah, these things move at about 1,200 hammer units per second, a little over, 1,216.6. Now, the cannonballs from the loose cannon, which I'll actually pop myself to show you here. Come on. These cannonballs move a bit faster at 1,453.9. But, well, oops. Guess the runway doesn't like the loose cannon very much. There we go. So yeah, these things are visibly quite a bit faster. They are, in fact, 20% faster, if I'm remembering the exact number. But, well, like I said, that's not really enough for them to be out of the grouping of the grenades. In fact, the lock and load is also a little bit faster than that at around 1,513 hammer units per second. But, you know, that's still pretty slow. Sure, it's 5 times faster than the default speed, but it's not exactly blistering. You know, it's only 3 times, not even 3 times as fast as a babyface scout at full boost. Of course, that does mean that it's pointless to try and outrun any of these. Even the slowest projectiles in the game, the sticky bombs, go at more than 3 times the normal speed. So you're pretty slow. Now, our next stop is the medic, as mentioned before. Now, I said that these things are super hard to hit with. It's because they are super slow. The syringes from the syringe guns, all 3 of them, move at a blistering 1,000 hammer units per second, making them the 2nd slowest projectile in the game. Yeah. Very fast. They're best used against someone who is actually coming at you. This makes them very effective in that, you know, personal defense weapon type role, because that's increasing their effective travel time. Now, the throwables for Sniper and Scout are both roughly 1,020 hammer units per second. Mad Milk is actually a little bit faster. Okay. But, well, they're both in the same category, and it's less than 10 hammer units, so I'm just going to say they're both around the same. In fact, they're both a little slower than the 1020 that I mentioned. So yeah, you can see, obviously, you're not going to be able to run away from that, but you might be able to just get out of its splash radius in time if you see it coming. But of course, that's not where Sniper ends. No, no, no. We've also got the infamous Huntsman with its ridiculous... Nope, I'm aiming up too much. Hang on. I'm not doing my point any justice here. There we go. It's ridiculous hitbox. Yeah, see? That. How was that a headshot? It just was. Don't question it. So, yeah, this thing is not exactly the most popular among the community because it's renowned for being a little bit inconsistent about what is and isn't a headshot. Like, I shot over their heads. Not quite by that much. But yeah, shooting over someone's head usually still results in a headshot. And part of the reason for that is to account for, you know, the travel time. Because, see, at minimum charge, this thing is actually pretty slow. A fair bit faster than the syringes, to be sure. But it is still only around 1,800 hammer units per second. A little faster than that, 1,812. But, yeah. The ridiculous hitbox, which, you know, if you're going to give this thing such a ridiculous hitbox, why not give the syringes such a ridiculous hitbox? Oh well. Yeah. Of course, that's only at minimum charge. At maximum charge, this thing gets up to a fair bit faster. At, drumroll please, 2,600 hammer units per second, meaning that they are the second fastest projectile in the game. Yeah, for some reason, arrows shot from an actual freaking bow are not the fastest projectile in the game. And you will be surprised by what actually is. I can almost guarantee it, because it makes no sense. Well, one of the two, because it's actually a tie between two. Or a tie between 3 or 4, however you want to rule it. Now, stepping up one more, we now get to the next projectile class, Soldier. Now, Soldier's rockets move at a blisteringly slow 1,100 hammer units per second. You might remember that I complained about this being very slow for syringes. That is because it is. But it's not quite as bad for rockets because, well, they do that. If you can hit an entire area around someone, then you don't need precise aim. And if your projectiles aren't affected by gravity in the slightest, well, it becomes a whole lot less of an issue when they're slow because you can just sort of fire and forget. Boink. So yeah, these things are pretty slow, but there are... See, rockets are the one area where it is, in fact, a huge difference that breaks between categories. So this is where I'm going to go into more detail. See, the regular rocket launcher, and most of its fellows, move at a respectable 1,100, as I mentioned. But then you get crazy ones. For instance, this here Liberty Launcher. Yeah, this thing goes at 1,540. Meaning, it's actually a lot faster. It's basically almost a 50% speed increase. 40% actually, exactly. This thing is pretty well known for being sort of a new version of the rocket launcher because it's a lot faster. It's got more shots, but it does less damage. So if you are, say, trying to train to actually hit rockets, it's a nice little crutch. Of course, its explosions are also smaller, meaning it's not a perfect crutch. But that is just half the speed increase that you get from the direct hit, which is basically the Liberty Launcher on steroids, in that it has such a small explosion radius that it's basically a single target weapon. But you can do that with it. Boink. Oop. It also, as you may have noticed, does enough damage to one-shot light classes at closer ranges. So, yeah. Don't mess with this thing. If someone competent is using it, i.e. someone who is not me, they will probably one-shot you, or two-shot you, depending on your class. I mean, even a heavy can get kind of annihilated by this thing. Obviously, like I said, I'm pretty bad with it. But that 80% speed increase is something. These things move at 1,980 hammer units per second. Oh, that poor scout. Poor sniper. I feel absolutely nothing for either of them. Now, Soldier does also have one other projectile weapon. The tragedy of a bad weapon being nerfed for no good reason. The Righteous Bison. Now, this thing is good against people who are running away. However, it is only slightly faster than the rockets at 1,200. And as you saw there, it sometimes likes to collide with geometry. By which I mean the air. So, yeah, this despite the fact that, at least in theory, its projectiles penetrate everything. You know, except solid cover, which is where that issue comes in. But yeah, just don't use this thing on ramps or stairs. Half the time it doesn't work on them. Which, yeah. And if you want to punish someone who's running away as a soldier, just do this. Yeah. You'll get faster rocket jumping than the projectile from the Bison can catch up with. So, yeah. The Bison is bad, and so, in fact, is its same-speed cousin, the Thompson. The only bad weapon for Engineer. Now, it doesn't entirely share the Bison's, mid-air finickiness. It does share some of it, to be sure. I mean, yeah. But see, that's not as much of an issue for the Thompson, because it's not a good weapon at all. Like, the Bison has uses. The Thompson does not, in large part because of this. Watch, I'm going to slow this bit down here. Note the frame delay between me clicking and it actually shooting. You have to lead your shots so much with this thing. And of course, whereas the Bison's projectile has a rather large hitbox, this thing doesn't. It actually has a pretty tiny one. And it's really, really unforgiving to use. And even though it is clearly meant as a sort of mid-range to long-range weapon instead of the usual close-range shotgun, the Engineer has a better version of that. A better ranged projectile weapon. This baby. Now, the wonderful, wonderful Rescue Ranger has shots that go at a stunning 2,400 hammer units per second, which is also the speed that the Medic's Crusader's crossbow fires its bolts at. This is literally twice as fast as the Pomson. It does basically the same damage. Admittedly, the Rescue Ranger's point-blank damage is the Pomson's mid-range damage. But, you know, you can actually hit these shots. So, yeah. Next up, on the speed frenzy, whatever you want to call it, is Pyro. Now, Pyro, most of his projectiles are the other guys, because right-click exists. Yes, that's right. With the power of right-click, I negate all projectiles. But, for times when that doesn't work, there's these guys. The detonator, the scorch shot, and the flare gun. If you use the scorch shot, you deserve to die, though. These things go at a very respectable 2,000 hammer units per second. As does, well, as roughly does their wonderful, incredibly good in MVM, incredibly bad everywhere else friend / replacement, the Gas Passer. Now, the Gas Passer goes just a little bit faster, 2009, but, well, it's, there's no point in ever using it, and if you see it being used, you don't really have to worry about it. So don't. And then we come to the single, or not so much single, but the 4 fastest projectiles in the game. First off, this thing. Dragon's Fury. Clocking in at a very respectable 3,000 hammer units per second. That means it's 10 times the speed of the man using it. Or woman. Or non-binary person. Whatever Pyro is. Whoever Pyro is. This thing goes fast. Unsurprisingly. But it's not the only thing that goes that fast. Because Scout, not only does he run fast, but he can apparently throw faster than a bow can shoot. Allow me to demonstrate. You see this thing? It's a meat cleaver. It's a meat cleaver that goes 3,000 hammer units per second. You see this? It's a glass wrapping ornament, or a Christmas ornament. It goes 3,000 hammer units per second. I do not know why these things have to fly so absurdly fast. I mean, I guess it helps give Scout more range. But, like, why, though? It's just not worth it. And, of course, the Scout also has the Sandman, which flies the same as the freaking Guillotine and the Rap Assassin. 3,000 hammer units a second. I could not begin to tell you who thought this was a good idea. Of course, the Sandman also slows you. And that brings us to the last part of this video on speed. Slowing effect. You might think that with how important speed is in this game, how much I've spent the last 15 minutes talking about it, you might think that it is very debilitating to get slowed down. But this is, in fact, not the case. You see, there is a bug in all Source games that causes you to actually be able to completely ignore being slowed down. Now, this doesn't let you move however fast you want. It's not that much of an exploit. but it is very much an exploit nonetheless. You see, all it really takes is just smashing left and right while you move forward. And you just ignore any slow that's on you. Now, I have a personal theory as to why this works the way that it does. See, most games that are ported over from console don't really try to do anything about the diagonal movement error. This is an issue that arises whenever you have a game that has simplistic directional inputs, let's say. So if I press forward, that means I'm going forward at, in the case of this scout, 360 hammer units per second. If I press sideways, I'm going sideways at slightly slower because of how the game slows you down when you are moving backwards or sideways or crouching. Now, the issue is, if you're moving diagonally, these two should be vectored. Instead, most games just add them, which means that moving diagonally actually ends up being faster than moving forward. This is obviously an issue. So for a very mobility-based game like TF2 that was also originally on the console, and therefore needed some sort of fix to this issue, well, the fix they implemented was something in the code of source that I am not entirely sure of. I believe that it simply calculates your capped speed based on the vector of those two every time you change direction while moving forward or backward. This makes sense. You know, it recalculates, okay, what should your speed cap be, and then adjusts you towards that. Since TF2 also has a very helpful and intuitive system where movement isn't just you're moving and then you stop right away. You slow down for a bit first, which is even more apparent the faster you're moving. So when I'm, you know, at this full babyface splaster boost scout, it takes me maybe half a second or so to slow down from full boost movement. What that means, though, is that your movement is essentially being gradually scaled because it also takes you a little while to speed up. So when you are being slowed and you're constantly forcing the game to recalibrate what your speed cap should be, I think what's happening is that it's recalibrating it, and then after it recalibrates it, then it realizes, oh wait, you're slowed, and it has to then manually factor in well, not manually, but it has to secondarily factor in the slow effect, for which there is a slight delay. So you end up switching faster than it is actually calculating. And because source is spaghetti, I can absolutely see it not calculating that fast. So during the perhaps, maybe, it's even that it's, you know, not even calculating the effect of the slowdown until you get hit by something that applies a slow or you reach maximum speed. I can see either of those things being the case. Regardless, because of the attempt at fixing vectored momentum, this thing is a pile of spaghetti. And unfortunately, that means that slowing items like the Sandman and the Natasha for heavy are completely useless. If you are ever in a situation where you are slowed in this game, just mash A and D while holding W or S. W works better because you move faster when you're moving forwards. That's it. That's all there is to it, genuinely. And it's frustrating because, you know, it's a mobility-based game. You're supposed to, you know, be able to counter your opponent's mobility with these items, and no, you're not actually able to do that in the slightest. That's fair, right? So yeah, we're at almost an hour. That brings us right up to the end of what we're going to be talking about today. But, crucially, there's one last thing that I didn't mention. And that is how to actually apply this. See, that's something that you only really gain through experience. Learning how to move when, how to predict your opponent's movements, that's all just something that you build up through intuition and muscle memory. You know, the same way that you just sort of learn to talk and walk through osmosis, well, you kind of have to learn how to move in TF2 the same sort of way. You can't just take, you know, what you're watching here and be like, oh, if I was doing that, I would absolutely nail every one of those shots, because you just have to click when the cursor is over it. I'm moving almost twice as fast as these guys are, and they are not big targets. Yes, I am bad at this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone without any practice is going to be even this good. So, more than anything else, if you want to get good at this game, get a map like this one. This is TR Walkway RC2. It's sort of the gold standard, more or less, for training maps. Just load up a training map, practice a little, get good at the game. You can, you know, just spend like 2-3 minutes doing this when you wouldn't necessarily have the time for an actual proper match or anything like that. Or you can, you know, use this to practice things and test out new combinations, or just practice one thing over and over and over that requires relatively controlled conditions that you wouldn't get in a match. For instance, let's say I want to practice my market gardening as soldier, if I can remember my market gardener loadout. There we go, it's my first one. So let's say I want to practice my market gardening. Well, first things first, let's... No, we don't want Launchpad. We want... Here we go. Come on. There we go. So, what do? Well, I'm not doing a very good job of it, because I don't market garden. That's the thing, right? But, you know, let's say I'm practicing it here, because I want to be able to do it. Ah, shit, I air-shot it. Yeah, I'm real bad at this because I never actually learned how to air strafe. I'm just bad at that. And I forgot to crouch. There, I landed a market garden. You're not going to get people just letting you market garden them like this under a normal game situation. You're going to have to, well, just sit around and wait, unless you want to do like I'm doing here. Oop. Ah, dang it. Oh, and I blew myself up. Well, regardless, that's going to be all for this TF2sday TF tutorial. So, thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.